Hey there, just last week I published a video about the new Cloud and SAC tool called the vCISO, the Cloud and SAC vCISO, which is available in the ChatGPT store. Very exciting. This week I've been working on a second tool that is useful for cybersecurity practitioners and program owners in operations in companies. Of course, mindful that these tools are available, independent, and powered by the public open AI engine. So there is, of course, that concern of absolutely not entering enterprise data and not sending private data and protected data into this model. Don't use it for that. But if you have open source code or code that you just want to verify that you developed and you want to verify against a set of best practices, well, we've got the tool just for you. Okay, first things first. This tool is all about secure development lifecycle. We know that working in cybersecurity, we depend heavily on the security of the software that is often adopted by our organizations and, of course, by ourselves. We know that supply chain is a growing concern amongst the industry and amongst the community. That is because we are ever more dependent on third-party software, third-party providers helping us out with their solutions in our environment. Also, very dependent on open source code. So then how do we look at best practices for all of this code, and how do we keep track, and what kind of tools can we use when we're going through the CNA process, certification and accreditation for our organization? Well, if your organization is using OpenAI openly for this code, and if you have the assurance that this is okay to do so, you might use this tool here that I'm presenting today. But also, if you are just doing research for yourself on what does a code look like in terms of best practice, this tool is just perfect for you. Okay, so as I'm showing on screen right here, what we have is the Microsoft, as you would have seen maybe in the past, security development lifecycle from Microsoft. These are all the set of guidelines that Microsoft implements and talks about when developing software themselves, but also what customers and what everyone in the industry should be looking at when they're developing software. It is a long list of pillars, long list of domains that should be looked at. So defining security requirements, performing threat modeling, that is particularly important in order to assess that everything that you've implemented works accordingly and that there are no gaps when you are adopting a software in your environment, gaps of potential that could lead to data loss, for example, or gaps that could lead to a takeover of your data, for example. And there's a lot more best practices here, such as defining the use of cryptography standards, managing the security risk of third-party components, a lot of things that you need to do in order to ensure the proper adoption and the proper development of code following secure code best practices. Of course, you should have a team at your disposal, or if you're developing the code yourself, we are all kind of learning to develop something and to code at some point. I'm working on my Python skills currently, and so I'm worried about what kind of scripts should I write and how, following best practices in order to make it secure, right? So we're all doing that. And then when we look at the threats, Microsoft has their own threat modeling framework for it, the STRIDE model, as you can see here on screen. So you can see how the STRIDE model focuses on STRIDE, spoofing, tampering, remediation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. So looking at all these different domains here versus, of course, when you're implementing and going through threat modeling in your environment. We have OASP, the organization that is focused on web application security, for example, have their own SDLC, Secure Development Lifecycle Guidelines here. For example, this has been authored by Ian Curie and Jing Maniko, for example. And as you can see, there are a lot of steps that need to be taken in order to go through the proper verification, the assessment of secure code. And this should always be taken in consideration when you're developing software. Go through all the phases that are needed in order to properly test, threat model, ensure that there are no gaps in your software. Snick, another software security provider, have their own discussion around the subject. So they look at the 5 phases of secure software development lifecycle, for example. So they talk about how threat modeling and design review is important, and then static analysis of the code, static analysis, reviewing the code line by line, doing a kind of a white box approach to analyzing your code, and then going into security testing and code review, which perhaps could implement some third-party code review, or of course pure analysis code review by someone else. But also security testing could include someone from security actually using and ensuring that there are no available exploits on the code, looking at security assessment and secure configuration later, and then lastly a risk assessment overall on the platform, for example. Kind of like all the phases that they list out. You should definitely look into this document if you want to learn more about it. But what I thought of doing then is just creating my own model within ChatGPT. So this is Code Checker, which is a ChatGPT model just looking at secure code best practices. It's focused on analyzing whatever script you throw at it. And of course, this script must be public, right? Make sure it's public, make sure it's nothing proprietary, because this is leveraging OpenAI. You're not meant to ever use a platform that's publicly accessible for sensitive data, right? But if you're just validating code, enter the code here, just throw in the code. The chat here will not respond to anything. It's just trained and instructed to only analyze code, okay? It's not gonna run anything. It's not gonna do anything for you besides checking code. And what I added at the end of the chat here, or the GPT, is a validation or the creation of a diagram of what has been analyzed by the platform. So essentially creating a diagram, the code that you sent it. For this, what I'm leveraging is a framework called Mermaid Live. So it spits out a Mermaid Live script that hopefully will work, and hopefully you can paste in the Mermaid Live webpage and have a look at what that code diagram looks like for ease of understanding, but also for documenting if you're doing that yourself. For example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to GitHub, and on GitHub, I randomly chose this script that I had seen in the past. I haven't used it myself, but I know it's a Python script that performs a specific task within OBS, for example, a software video recorder here. So this is publicly available. It is open source. Now, if I copy and paste it in here, we know that ChatGPT, this is, in order for you to use this tool, by the way, you have to be a ChatGPT Plus subscriber. That means ChatGPT will accept at least 8,000 tokens. So be mindful of that, by the way. But once you send out the code, it's a very long code, the GPT then, or the bot, is going to essentially analyze everything. It describes what it does, and it lists out the components and functionalities of the script. And it also tells me here hotkey functions that it potentially uses, and so on and so forth. And at the end here, it tells me security and best practices, right? So it describes the code to me, and at the end it tells me the security and best practices. It highlights to me here that the third-party libraries that are used should always be trusted sources and up to date, and of course avoid security vulnerabilities. This is awesome, because if you're just consuming the script at times, and if you're just running that script for yourself, you might not have the knowledge to analyze it properly, but also you might not have the understanding of doing this. So that's where this kind of bot is useful, right? So just leave it describe the code to you and analyze it for you. It didn't automatically generate the chart for me, so I went ahead and I asked it generate a diagram for it. And so at this point in time, it's checking the complexity of the script. I instructed it to try and develop a diagram regardless of the complexities. But if it's too complex, it's not going to do something very detailed, doing something high level. At this point in time, it's generated the Mermaid code here, Mermaid Live format, which I can copy it, and hopefully it will work when I paste on the mermaid.live website. So there you go, I just pasted it, and you can see here that there is unfortunately an error code here on line 13. And for whatever reason here, there's a code. I understand that the platform here understands that the term end is a command of some type, so I just removed the name end there, as you can see, and there's no error anymore. But apparently this is the diagram of the script. I would have to review the script, go through it properly through the hundreds of lines to check and see that this is working properly. But essentially it helps me understand and visualize that this script starts, it loads a script, it updates something, and then it heads over to properties. The properties reads user input, toggle zoom, and so on and so forth. Just really help me see what this software should be doing. So if you are curious about the bot, make sure you click on the description of the link and you'll be able to test it. But also, if you're developing code and if you have public source code that you would like to check before you run, that might be a good option for you. So give it a go. Let me know in the comments if that's useful at all. Make sure you like and subscribe if that's helpful to you. And of course, let me know what else is on your mind. And for everything else, Microsoft security, cloud, AI security, and the future of cybersecurity, make sure you subscribe for more content. All right, see you next time.